Right, morning everyone. Another video from me just on algebraic equations. As you can see, we have an algebraic equation, left side, right side, equal sign in the middle. On the left side, we see two fractions. On the right side, we see one fraction and a constant. So what we want to do whenever we see fractions, we want to have everything as a fraction. Okay, so what we're going to do, this one, we're going to write as 1 over 1. That's the same thing, right? So that's the first step, make everything a fraction. Then the second step is to determine the lowest common denominator. Lowest common denominator. So let's see, we have, let's just see, this is a bit unstable. Let's see if this works better. Okay, hopefully this will work. So we have a 5q, a 3q, a 1 and a q. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to determine the lowest common denominator for the coefficients. So we have a 5, a 3, a 1 and there's also a 1 in front of the q. So so pretty much it's just between the 5 and the 3, so it will be 15. Because 3 can't go into 5, but if we take 10, 3 can't go into 10, 15, 3 can go into 15. So 15 is the lowest common denominator when you look at your coefficients, but then you also need to realize that you have variables here, q, q, and q. Now you must always, your variable must always be part of your lowest common denominator, so you'll have a q there, and then even though you don't have a q here, it doesn't matter. Okay, if there's a q somewhere, if there's a variable somewhere, it must be included in the lowest common denominator, and then you have to also include the highest exponent. Now for this one it's easy because there's just one exponent of 1, and your highest exponent, so let's say there was an exponent of 3, so there was maybe 5q to the power of 3. Then you have to add that 3 exponent there. But we don't have any exponents. Well, we have an exponent of 1, of course. So this is going to be our lowest common denominator, 15q. So now we're going to rewrite our equation with a denominator of 15q. So I'm just going to do it like this. I'm going to say 15q. And then for the second one, we also have 15q. And then 15q plus, and then we have 15q. Right, now you have to ask yourself the question, what do I have to multiply this original denominator with to get to the lowest common denominator? So that would be multiply with 3. So I have to do the same to the numerator. So 3 times 3 will result in 9. Then I check. From 3q to 15q, I multiply with 5. So I must do the same to the numerator. So there we have a 2 in front. Now you can use the distributive law there and calculate it, but I would suggest that you first take that 5 and multiply it with a 2. So then you'll end up with 10 times q plus 3 in brackets. Now from 1 to get to 15q, you just multiply it with 15q, so it's the same. And then 1q to get to 15q, you multiply it with 15, so you also have to multiply your numerator with 15. 2 times 15 is 30. Okay, so now we have a common denominator, lowest common denominator. So what can we do to get rid of the denominator? Because remember, we don't like the fractions, we don't want them there, so we want to get rid of them, so we must multiply with 15q. Let's just put it in brackets, and you have to do it on both sides. Now the only reason why we can do that is because we have an equation. If it was just an expression, like let's say that equal sign was a negative, then you cannot multiply with 15q because you will change the value of the algebraic expression. But because it's an equation, we are not changing anything, because the right side is still equal to the left side because we're doing exactly the same thing on the right side and on the left side. So nothing's changing. Okay, we're keeping the balance of the equation. What you do to the left side, you do to the right side. We're doing that. Okay, so what's going to happen? All of the denominators are going to disappear. So we'll have 9 minus 10 in brackets q plus 3 equals 15q plus 30. There you have it. Okay. And now we can just go ahead and solve this equation. But we first need to look at our brackets here. We need to apply the distributive law. So whatever's in front of the brackets needs to be multiplied with the q and the positive 3 with the sign as well. Remember, 9 is going to stay the same. Negative 10 times q is negative 10q. Negative 10 times positive 3 is negative 30 equals 15q plus 30. Right, now you have to remember that you want your q's on the one side and your constants on the other side. But before we do that, let's first simplify the two sides. Well, this side is simplified, right? We can't simplify it further, but the left side we have two constants. 9 minus 30. What is 9 minus 30? It will give us negative 21 minus 10q equals 15q plus 30. Now we need to decide which side do we want our q's. Now it's actually easier to move it to the right side because then we'll end up with a positive value for q. It just makes our life a bit simpler. Okay, if you take it to the left side, that's also fine, but then you just have to divide with a negative to get rid of whatever's in front of the q. Okay, so remember now, if we move that to the right side, we have to do the inverse operation of subtraction, which is addition. So it will become 15q, which is just this 15q, plus 10q, plus 30. And on the left side, we have negative 21 left. Okay, it all comes down to taking the inverse operation. If you take the inverse operation of negative 10q, it's positive 10q. Okay, so you have to do the same on the right side. Right, so let's just quickly simplify. 15q plus 10q gives me 25q plus 30, negative 21. Now we need to take this positive 30 to the left side because we wanted all the constants on the left side. So what do? If we move it, we have to take the inverse operation, which is negative 30. So we'll have negative 21 minus 30 equals 25q. So we're in the negative, we're going more into the negative. Negative 51 equals 25q. Okay, let me just move it up slightly. And then what do we have to do? To get rid of the 25 that's in front of the q, you have to divide with 25. And what you do on the right side, you do on the left side as well. So what do we end up with? We end up with q equals negative 51 over 25. Let's think, are there perhaps can we simplify this fraction? Negative 51 over 25. Well, 2 isn't a common factor. 3 is not. 5 is not. 6, 7, 8. No, it's not going to work. So that is the simplest form. Always remember to investigate that final answer and make sure that it's the simplest form. Okay, that's it. Thanks, guys.